The moment I walked onto that stage for my high school graduation, I thought my life was finally turning in the right direction. The sun was warm, the crowd was loud, and for the first time in years I felt like I had done something worth celebrating. I had worked hard, late nights, early mornings, skipped meals, endless assignments, and somehow, against all the odds stacked against me, I became valedictorian. Everyone kept saying how proud my family must be, how lucky I was to have such a big moment ahead of me. But deep inside, I knew this day might not unfold the way everyone expected. My father and I had never shared that kind of bond. What people saw on the outside was nothing like what I felt growing up behind closed doors. Still, I hoped, just for one day, that things would be different. As I stood there waiting to give my speech, my heart was racing, not because I was nervous about the crowd, but because I kept glancing over at my father. His expression was cold, unreadable, like he was watching a stranger instead of his own child. Every time our eyes met, I felt something heavy inside my chest, something I had gotten used to ignoring. I told myself to focus on the moment, to soak in the applause, to let myself feel proud for once. But the truth was, I was scared of what would happen when it was his turn to speak. He had insisted, almost demanded, that he be allowed to say a few words. Everyone assumed it was because he wanted to honor me. Only I knew that wasn't the full story. Still, I stepped up, delivered my speech, and the crowd cheered like I had just opened the door to a bright future. Teachers were smiling, students were shouting my name, and parents I barely knew were clapping like they had watched me grow up. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe I had been wrong about my father. Maybe this was the day he would finally say something kind. Something supportive. Something that didn't cut through me like a blade. I wanted that more than I wanted any award, any title, any recognition. But when he walked toward the microphone, everything inside me went still. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and gave the crowd a smile I had never seen directed at me. Everyone went quiet, expecting some emotional, proud father speech. Maybe a joke, maybe a memory from my childhood. Something warm, something inspiring. But instead he looked straight at me, only me, and said words that sliced through the air so sharply the entire stadium shifted. He called me a waste of space. The moment the words left his mouth, the world around me blurred. People gasped, teachers exchanged confused looks, and some even started whispering. The sound echoed in my ears like a bell I couldn't shut off. He didn't stop there. He kept talking, saying things that made me feel small, worthless, like all the work I had done meant nothing because it came from me. He spoke casually, as if breaking his child down in public was something normal, something acceptable. I stood frozen, every muscle in my body trembling. I didn't feel anger first. I felt embarrassment, a deep, painful embarrassment that wrapped around me like a heavy cloth. I felt the weight of every eye in the crowd staring at me, trying to understand what kind of father would humiliate their child like that on one of the biggest days of their life. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't even look away. In that moment, I realized something important. The hurt I felt didn't start that day. It had been building for years, hidden in the corners of my childhood, wrapped in silence and fear. But hearing those words in front of everyone snapped something inside me. If I stayed there, listening to him tear me down again, I knew I would never escape the shadow he had built around my life. So when the ceremony ended and everyone rushed toward their families, I did something no one expected. I walked away. No bag. No phone. No money. No plan. Just the clothes I was wearing and the decision that I wasn't going back home, not even for a second. The whispers behind me grew louder, but I didn't turn around. My feet kept moving, fueled by a mixture of pain and something new, something sharp, something determined. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time, I felt like I was walking toward a life that belonged to me. The streets were hot, crowded, and noisy, but I kept moving until the school was far behind me. My father's voice was still echoing in my head, but now it felt different. Instead of breaking me, it was pushing me toward independence, toward freedom. Toward the possibility of becoming someone he never believed I could be. That night, I slept on a wooden bench behind a closed shop, hugging myself for warmth and replaying every moment of the ceremony. The pain was still fresh, but something stronger was growing beneath it, an ambition I didn't even know I had. I told myself that if I survived the humiliation of that day, I could survive anything. And if I could survive anything, then I could build anything. Even from nothing. That was the beginning of my journey. A journey filled with struggle, long days, sleepless nights, small victories, and unexpected allies. A journey that would teach me resilience, discipline, forgiveness, and the true meaning of success. A journey that would eventually lead me to building something far greater than I ever imagined. A business, a reputation, and a life of my own making. But back then, on that first night, sitting alone with nothing but hurt and determination, I had no idea what was waiting ahead. I didn't know how many battles I would fight, how many doors would close, or how many times I would have to rebuild myself. All I knew was this. If my father believed I was a waste of space, then I would prove to the world, and to myself, that I wasn't. And what happened next, no one saw coming. That first night on the wooden bench felt like the longest night of my life. Every sound in the dark made me jump, every passing car made me shrink into myself, and every cold breeze reminded me that I wasn't home. But strangely, I didn't want to be. Even with the fear, the uncertainty, and the ache in my bones, I felt lighter than I had felt in years. I didn't have my father's voice shouting from the next room. I didn't have to tiptoe around the house, scared of saying the wrong thing. I didn't have to pretend everything was fine. The silence, even with all its loneliness, felt like freedom. When morning came, I walked toward the main road, hoping to find something, anything, that could help me figure out my next step. My clothes were wrinkled, my stomach was empty, and my mind felt like it was trying to adjust to the idea of starting life from zero. But I kept walking. The city was already alive with noise, buses honking, vendors calling out prices, kids shouting as they chased each other. It was chaotic, but it felt like the kind of place where someone could disappear and start over without anyone asking too many questions. I wandered for hours, stopping at small shops and asking if they needed help sweeping or packing boxes. Most people looked at me like I was trouble. Some were polite, others dismissive. A few didn't even bother to answer. I didn't blame them. I looked like someone who had run away from something, someone without a plan, someone who couldn't offer much. Still, I didn't give up. I kept searching, kept asking, kept hoping. The sun was high when I finally stopped near a small roadside food stall. The smell of grilled meat and spices hit me so hard my stomach growled loud enough for the vendor to hear. He gave me a curious look, probably wondering why a student in graduation clothes was standing alone, looking hungry. I expected him to tell me to move aside or ask if I planned to buy anything. But instead he asked, "You want something?" I hesitated, unsure if he was being kind or sarcastic. I don't have money." For a moment he didn't say anything. Then he pointed to a stool in the corner and said, "Sit. You can sweep the front after you eat." That simple gesture, just a plate of food and a few minutes of kindness, felt like something I hadn't experienced in years. Maybe not ever. I ate slowly, letting the warmth fill my chest. When I finished, I picked up the broom and cleaned every corner of the area, wanting to show him I was grateful. He watched quietly, nodding occasionally. When I was done, he handed me a bottle of water and said, "You're running from something. But running isn't always bad. Just make sure you're running towards something too." His words stayed with me long after I left the stall. I knew I couldn't survive on favors forever. I needed a real place to stay, even if it wasn't much. I needed money. I needed a plan. So I kept walking until I found a small, old building with a cardboard sign that said, "Rooms available." The place was worn out, cracked windows peeling paint, but I didn't care. I went inside, explained my situation to the owner, and asked if I could help around the building in exchange for a place to sleep. He studied me for a long time, tapping his fingers on the counter. I felt my heartbeat quicken, scared he would say no. But then he asked, "You good with cleaning? Fixing small things?" I nodded. "I'll learn whatever you teach me." That was all it took. He walked me to a tiny storage room with a thin mattress and said I could stay there if I worked each morning. It wasn't much, but to me it felt like the first step of something. A starting point. The days that followed were tiring. I cleaned floors, fixed broken doors, carried heavy boxes, and scrubbed walls until my hands hurt. But every night, when I lay down on that thin mattress, I felt a strange sense of accomplishment. I wasn't living the life I imagined, but at least it was mine. No shouting. No insults. No judgment. Just hard work and the quiet hope that things would someday get better. Still, my father's words followed me everywhere. Waste of space. They echoed in my mind every time I made a mistake, every time someone frowned at me, every time I felt tired. It was like he had planted a seed of doubt deep inside me, and it kept trying to grow. I didn't know how to silence that voice, not yet, but I promised myself I would try. That promise grew stronger the day I met a woman named Auntie Reese. She ran a small kiosk near the busy part of town, selling handmade items. Woven baskets, wooden carvings, beaded jewelry. Her booth was always surrounded by tourists and locals, drawn to the bright colors and her loud, cheerful voice. I passed her stall often on my way to different jobs, and she always greeted me with a smile, even before she knew my name. One afternoon she waved me over and handed me a bracelet saying, "You look like someone who needs a little luck." I laughed softly and told her I didn't believe in luck. She shook her head. Luck isn't magic. It's momentum. One small step forward that leads to another. Her words stuck with me. She had this way of making everything feel possible. Over the next few days we talked a lot. She told me about her early struggles, how she had started with nothing but a few handmade items and the determination to create something meaningful. She talked about long nights, failed attempts, and the moment she realized she could turn her skills into a business. I listened quietly, absorbing every detail. Something in her story sparked a feeling in me, a mix of curiosity, admiration, and a strange kind of hope. I didn't know what I wanted to build yet, or what skills I had that could help me create something of my own. But listening to her made me feel like maybe I wasn't as helpless as I felt. One evening as I helped her pack up her kiosk, she looked at me and said, "You're carrying something heavy. But heavy things can be shaped into something strong if you know how to work with them." I almost told her everything, the graduation, my father, the humiliation, but the words got stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded. She handed me a small notebook and said, "Write your ideas. Even if they seem small. Especially if they seem small." That night, under the dim light of the storage room, I opened the notebook and stared at the blank pages. My hands trembled as I picked up the pen. I didn't know what to write, but I let my thoughts spill out, dreams, fears, memories, wishes. By the time I stopped, the pages were filled with messy handwriting and scattered ideas. I didn't know it then, but that notebook would become the beginning of everything I would eventually build. Still, the conflict inside me didn't disappear. My father's voice was still there, loud and sharp, reminding me of everything he believed I wasn't. Every step forward felt like a battle against that voice. And every mistake I made felt like he was being proven right. But I refused to stop. Not after coming this far. Not after leaving everything behind. What I didn't know was that something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would shake everything again, push me even harder, and force me to confront the past I thought I had escaped. And when it arrived, it would change the direction of my life in a way I never imagined. The days that followed felt steady on the surface, but underneath everything, a quiet storm was forming. I kept working at the building during the mornings, then spent my afternoons helping Auntie Reese with her kiosk whenever she needed an extra hand. At night, I returned to my tiny storage room and scribbled new thoughts in the notebook she'd given me. I didn't know what direction I was heading in, but something inside me kept pushing, like a small fire that refused to go out no matter how much doubt tried to smother it. Still, even with the little progress I was making, a heavy part of me stayed tangled in the past. My father's voice lingered in the back of my mind, showing up at the worst moments. Whenever someone looked at me too long or questioned what I was doing, I felt his words crawl up my spine again. It was strange how a single sentence from someone could shape the way you saw yourself, even when you were trying so hard to move on. I knew I needed to break free from that shadow, but I had no idea how to do it. One afternoon, as I was organizing beads at the kiosk, I overheard a conversation between two tourists who were admiring the handmade pieces. They were talking about how people with nothing often created the most beautiful things, how pain sometimes gave birth to creativity. Something about their words made my chest tighten. I wondered if that was true. Could all the hurt I carried really become something meaningful? Or was I just fooling myself with hope? Before I could think too much, a voice behind me snapped me out of my thoughts. It was Tendo, the building owner's nephew. He was around my age but carried himself like someone who had seen much more of the world. He wasn't rude, but he had a blunt way of speaking that sometimes rubbed people the wrong way. "You're working 2 jobs now?" he asked, leaning against a post. "You planning to sleep at all?" I shrugged. "Can't afford not to." He studied me with a confused frown, like he was trying to piece together a puzzle. "You didn't run away from home because of money, did you?" His guess startled me and I almost dropped the beads. "Why would you say that?" He pointed at my uniform shoes, the ones I still wore from graduation day. "People who run away for no reason don't look like they left right after an event. Something must have happened." I didn't answer. Silence came easier than explaining. Tendo didn't push, but he stayed nearby and helped me organize the bracelets. He wasn't the type to show much emotion, yet somehow his presence made the air feel lighter. I didn't know it then, but Tendo would become a complicated part of my life. Someone who wanted to help, yet carried his own secrets that kept us on unstable ground. Later that evening, as I walked back to the building, I noticed something strange. A car I didn't recognize was parked across the street, and for a moment, I felt a rush of unease. The windows were tinted and someone was sitting inside, though I couldn't see their face clearly. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but as I turned toward the building's entrance, the car door opened slightly, just enough to make my heart race. No one stepped out. No voice called my name. But the feeling that someone was watching clung to me all night like a shadow. The next morning I tried to brush off the unease, but as I swept the hallway the building owner called me over. He held out an envelope with my name written on it. My full name, including the middle one, almost no one knew. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No message. Just a printed photo of me walking away from my graduation ceremony, still wearing my sash, still trying to hide the tears on my face. Someone had taken that picture. Someone had followed me far enough to know where I ended up. I felt my breath catch. My stomach tightened. The room suddenly felt smaller. The owner asked if everything was all right, but I couldn't answer. All I could think was that the past I was trying so hard to escape had somehow found its way back to me. But I didn't know who sent the photo. My father? Someone else from the ceremony? Or someone I hadn't considered at all? I folded the photo quickly and stuffed it back into the envelope, not wanting anyone else to see. That one image brought back every emotion I tried to bury: shame, fear, confusion, and an anger that simmered deep beneath the surface. I forced myself to go about the day, but my focus was gone. My thoughts kept drifting back to the car I'd seen, to the way its engine hummed quietly in the background, to the way the envelope appeared without explanation. I didn't want trouble, but trouble felt like it was circling me slowly, waiting for the right moment to strike. When I reached the kiosk that afternoon, Auntie Reese immediately sensed something was wrong. She had a way of reading people that felt almost supernatural. She didn't ask questions at first, she just handed me a stool and told me to sit. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "Sometimes the things you run from aren't finished with you," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean they get to decide where your story goes." I wanted to believe her, but the fear in my chest was too real to ignore. So I told her everything: the photo, the car, the feeling of being watched. She didn't look shocked. Instead, she looked troubled, as if something in my story connected to something she had seen before. "You have to stay alert," she warned. "Not everything that follows you comes to harm you, but not everything comes in peace either." Her words added another layer to the tension already building around me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me sit up. Every shadow looked suspicious. I kept checking the small window, making sure no one was lurking outside. The envelope lay beside me and I kept staring at it, hoping to find clues in the blank message, the silent photograph. As the hours passed, a realization slowly crept into my mind, one that made my heart pound even harder. The photo wasn't taken by someone standing with the crowd. It was taken from a distance. From a car window. The same kind of car I saw earlier. I didn't know who was watching me or why or what they wanted. But the tension in the air was growing, thick enough to almost touch. And deep in my chest, I knew something was coming, something that would force me to face the past far sooner than I was ready. And when it arrived, it wouldn't just test my determination. It would shake everything about the life I was trying to build. The days that followed felt heavier than anything I'd experienced since leaving home. Every morning I woke up before the sun, my heart pounding before my eyes were even open. The storage room that once felt like my small space of freedom now felt like a box slowly tightening around me. I checked the door twice before sleeping, kept the lights on longer than usual, and jumped at every sound in the hallway. I didn't tell the building owner about the car or the photo again. He already looked worried the first time, and I didn't want him thinking I was bringing trouble into his building. But trouble was already here. I just didn't know how close it was. The car started appearing more often. Sometimes down the street, sometimes closer, sometimes parked so still that it seemed like part of the background. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, but deep down I knew it wasn't. It wasn't just watching, it was waiting. And whoever was inside knew exactly where I went every day. One evening, as I helped Auntie Reese pack up the last of her items, I noticed the same dark vehicle parked near the far corner of the market. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just watching me at the building anymore. It was following me to the busiest place in town, something that required more boldness or more confidence. I tried not to let my fear show, but my hands trembled so badly that I dropped a basket. Auntie Reese lifted her head immediately. "It's here again, isn't it?" I didn't even ask how she knew. She had a sense for danger the way others had a sense for weather changes. "It's the same car," I whispered, barely able to breathe. She rested her hand on mine, her tone low and serious. "You need to be careful. Someone who watches this long isn't just curious. They are planning something." The word planning made my entire body tense. I wanted to ask what she thought they wanted, but she didn't look like she had the answer, just a heavy feeling that made the air between us tighten. When we finished packing, she insisted on walking me halfway to the building, even though she usually avoided being out after dark. But that night, she stayed beside me until she was sure the car wasn't following closely. Before leaving, she pressed something into my palm, a small whistle on a string. "If anything feels wrong," she said, "use it." Loudly. "Don't think. Just act." Her seriousness only made my fear grow. And yet, I tucked the whistle under my shirt like a protective charm. Over the next few days, things only got stranger. Tendo noticed my anxiety even when I tried to hide it. One afternoon, he caught me flinching at a truck that backfired nearby. "You've been jumpy," he said bluntly. "More than usual." I forced a smile. "Just tired." He didn't believe it. "Something's going on. You can tell me. I'm not going to throw you out." His voice held a softness I wasn't used to, and for a moment, I considered telling him everything. About the photo, the car, the fear. But a part of me still held back. I didn't want to drag him into something I didn't understand. I didn't want anyone getting involved and getting hurt. So I brushed it off again. "I'm okay. Really." He didn't push, but the look he gave me made it clear he didn't believe a single word. That night, when I returned to the building, the corridor light flickered. It wasn't unusual, the wiring there was old, but the timing made my skin crawl. I hurried toward my room, trying to convince myself the feeling was in my head. But then I saw something taped to my door. Another envelope. My hands shook as I pulled it off. For a moment, I considered not opening it, pretending it wasn't there. But the curiosity was too strong, and the fear too overwhelming to ignore. Inside was another photograph. This one was taken from much closer. It showed me talking to Auntie Reese at her kiosk. Facing her, unaware of the camera, my expression tired and worried. The person had been close enough to hear us. Close enough to reach out and touch my shoulder if they wanted. My breath left my body in a rush. This wasn't just watching. This was stalking. I shut myself inside the room and locked the door, leaning against it as my pulse hammered wildly. I felt trapped between my past and something unknown, as if both were closing in at the same time. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. By the time morning came, I felt like a shadow of myself. I dragged my body through the cleaning work, barely responding when the building owner asked if I felt sick. Everything felt distant, like I was moving underwater. The fear had turned into something heavier, a kind of dread I couldn't shake. When I got to the kiosk that afternoon, the market felt noisier than usual. I kept scanning the crowd, searching for that car, that figure, that whoever it was who kept watching me. It wasn't there. But that didn't calm me. Sometimes the quiet before danger is worse than the danger itself. Auntie Reese noticed immediately. She pulled me aside and spoke in a serious tone I had never heard from her before. "You need to tell me everything you've been holding back." I hesitated, but the pressure inside me finally broke. I told her about the second envelope, the closer photo, the flickering lights, the feeling of being followed everywhere I went. She listened without interrupting, her face growing more tense with each detail. "I don't think this is random," she said finally. "Someone is trying to push you into fear." "But why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I don't know yet," she said quietly. "But whoever it is, they know you. Or they know about you." Her words chilled me. She insisted on closing the kiosk early that day. As we walked toward the building, we kept checking our surroundings, but nothing seemed out of place. It felt like the city was holding its breath, waiting. When we reached the building entrance, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "If anything happens, anything at all, you call me first." I nodded, even though my voice was too shaky to speak. That night, the fear didn't build slowly. It struck all at once. I was sitting on my mattress, staring at my notebook, trying to lose myself in ideas, when I heard footsteps outside my door. Slow. Heavy. Too deliberate to belong to someone just passing by. I froze. The steps stopped right in front of my door. Silence. Then a soft, almost gentle knock echoed through the room. 3 slow taps. My throat tightened so fast I couldn't breathe. I didn't move. I didn't answer. The air felt thick, like the walls themselves were watching. Another knock. This time deeper. Then a shadow slid across the bottom of the door, someone standing close enough to block out the hallway light. I clutched the whistle under my shirt, trying not to make a sound. My heart was beating so loudly I was sure it could be heard outside. And then, a voice. Soft. Familiar enough to stop my breath completely. "Open the door. We need to talk." I knew that voice. But I didn't want to believe it. It shouldn't have been possible. Yet it was there, whispering through the thin wood like it had never left my life. The voice of the person I had run away from. The person whose words had broken everything. My father. And he didn't sound angry. He sounded calm. Too calm. like he had been waiting for this moment all along. The moment hung in the air, sharp and heavy, as everyone waited to hear what would happen next. The tension inside the house felt different now, quieter, colder, like the kind of silence that comes right before a storm breaks open. She stood there, trying to steady her breathing, but her chest felt tight as she replayed everything she had just uncovered. The hidden messages, the strange phone calls, the sudden change in attitudes, each piece was falling into place, and the picture it was forming was far worse than she expected. Just when she thought she had gathered enough courage to confront the truth, another notification lit up her phone. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't from the person she had been suspicious of, it was from someone she had never imagined would be involved. The name on the screen made her legs weaken. She tapped the message with trembling hands, expecting a simple explanation, but the words she saw pulled her deeper into confusion. The new message revealed something shocking. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. Someone else, someone she trusted completely, had known about everything all along and had chosen to stay silent. The betrayal wasn't coming from one direction anymore, it was closing in on her from all sides. She felt like she was standing in the middle of a room where the walls were slowly moving inward, tightening around her. The weight of it made her heart race. Her mind spun as she tried to understand why they would hide something so important. What were they gaining from keeping her in the dark? And why did the message sound like a warning rather than a confession? It was as if this second person wasn't just involved, they were trying to stop her from discovering something bigger, something that would change everything she believed about her relationships, her home, and even her future. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, determined to find answers. But as she turned the corner, she froze. Whispering voices drifted down the hallway, two people speaking urgently, their tones sharp and tense. She recognized both voices instantly. Her heart pounded harder as she realized they were discussing her discovery, and the possibility that she was getting too close to the truth. Their words weren't angry, they were afraid. That fear told her one thing: whatever they were hiding wasn't small. It wasn't simple. It wasn't something she could ignore anymore. The stakes had just doubled. The second twist left her shaken. Now she didn't know who to trust, what to believe, or how deep the deception went. But one thing was clear: the night wasn't anywhere near its end. What she uncovered next would decide everything. And as those whispers faded into a tense silence, she understood that the real storm was just beginning, and she was already standing right in the center of it. She stepped into the hallway, her footsteps quiet but firm, and the two voices fell silent the moment they saw her. Both of them looked like they had been caught standing at the edge of a secret they hoped would stay buried. The tension was thick, and for a moment no one spoke. She felt her hands shaking, but she refused to back down. She had spent too many nights confused, too many days pretending not to notice the small things piling up. She asked them directly what they were hiding. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a strength that surprised even her. The first person tried to explain, stumbling over excuses, but she had already heard too many half-truths. Before he could finish, the second person stepped forward and admitted everything. The sudden honesty hit her like a wave, leaving her still but alert, listening carefully. They confessed that the messages, the secret plans, the tense whispers, they weren't meant to hurt her. They were planning something behind her back, but not the painful thing she imagined. They had been putting together a surprise that involved her dreams, her work, and her future. They wanted to help her, not betray her. They had been saving money, talking to people, arranging something that would make her life easier. But they had kept it secret because they knew how stressed she was, how easily she would overthink, and they didn't want the surprise ruined. For a moment, the relief washed through her, warm and soft. The main conflict cracked open, showing a truth she wasn't expecting. A misunderstanding built from silence, fear, and assumptions. Her anger melted into hurt, but also into something gentler. She felt her heart ease as the tension in the room slowly softened. She understood now why things felt strange, why everyone seemed distant. It wasn't betrayal, it was poor communication and maybe a little too much secrecy. But just as the atmosphere began to settle, the real twist came. The phone that had shaken her earlier buzzed again. She looked down, expecting something simple this time. But the message wasn't from either of the people standing in front of her. It was from someone entirely different. Someone who shouldn't have known anything about the situation. The message said only one sentence, but it pulled every bit of calmness out of the room. I told you they would cover their tracks before you arrived. Both people looked just as confused as she felt. Their surprise was genuine, their eyes wide and honest. And suddenly she felt the air shift again, not with fear, but with a strange mix of curiosity and caution. Who had been watching? Who knew what was happening? How much had they seen? This new message didn't break her the way the earlier ones had. Instead, it lit something inside her: determination, strength, the need for answers. She realized the night wasn't ending here. The main conflict was resolved, the truth between them clear, but now a new mystery had opened, one she couldn't ignore. The story didn't close. It unfolded. And as she stared at that cryptic message, she felt a small shiver run through her, not from fear but from the thrill of knowing that the next chapter would reveal something even bigger. She stared at the message for a long moment, her breath quiet and steady, trying to decide if this was another misunderstanding or the beginning of something deeper. The two people in front of her stepped closer, their expressions unsure but sincere. One of them gently asked her what the message said, and she handed over the phone without hesitation this time. She didn't feel the need to hide anything anymore. They had already faced the worst of the tension together, and now there was nothing left but to deal with the truth. When they read the message, their confusion was real. They exchanged glances, trying to understand who would send something like that. It wasn't written in a threatening way, but it carried a strange confidence, as if the sender knew details none of them had shared with anyone. For a few seconds, each of them stood quietly, processing the situation in their own way. Then the second person suggested something simple. They would go through everything calmly, step by step, and figure out where the message came from. They sat together in the living room, the lights warm and steady, the earlier tension replaced with a shared determination. She explained everything she had been feeling for weeks. The strange moments, the whispered conversation she overheard, the doubt that had been growing inside her. They listened without interrupting, their faces soft with guilt and understanding. When she finished talking, they apologized again, not only for hiding things but for not noticing how overwhelmed she had become. They explained every detail of the surprise they had been planning, describing how they had reached out to people for help, how they had been saving money quietly, and how they wanted to do something meaningful for her because they believed she deserved it. The more they talked, the clearer everything became. The confusion she had carried for so long slowly turned into clarity. She realized how easy it is to misread good intentions when communication is missing. She realized how silence can grow into doubt, and doubt can create stories that are far from the truth. Even the surprise they were planning, something meant to bring her joy, had unintentionally caused her pain because it was wrapped in secrecy. Yet, now that everything was out in the open, she felt something healing inside her, like a knot loosening after being pulled tight for too long. Still, the message from the unknown sender lingered in the air. They checked the number, but it didn't match anyone they knew. The first person suggested it might be someone who misunderstood something or someone watching from a distance without knowing the full story. Another possibility was that it was someone who had seen tension but assumed the worst, creating drama without meaning to. The more they discussed it, the more obvious it became that the message was not a warning, it was a misunderstanding born from someone noticing the wrong moment at the wrong time. After a while, she felt the weight of that message slowly fade. Instead of fear, she felt curiosity and a sense of closure. Not everything would have a perfect explanation, and not every loose end needed to be chased. The important things, the real conflicts, had already been resolved. The mystery message felt like a reminder of how easily stories can twist when people don't communicate openly. It became a symbol of the chaos silence can create, not a threat to be frightened of. As the conversation continued, they spoke about setting better boundaries, staying honest even when planning surprises, and checking in with each other more often. They talked about trust, about how easily it can shake when words are left unsaid, and how important it is to protect it. She opened up about her fears, the insecurities she rarely voiced, and they listened with patience, giving her space to express everything she had been carrying. It was the first time in weeks she felt truly seen. In return, they shared their own worries, how they feared the surprise wouldn't be perfect, how they thought she might reject the idea if she knew too soon, and how they wanted to do something big for her because they believed in her dreams. Their honesty softened her, making her realize that even good intentions can get tangled in unexpected ways. When they finally stood up from the couch, the air felt lighter. The home, once filled with tension and misunderstanding, now felt warm and connected again. She looked around the room and felt grateful, not for the conflict but for the growth it forced them into. She realized that sometimes relationships strengthen in the moments you least expect, not through perfection but through the breakdowns that lead to rebuilding. Later that night, when she was finally alone in her room, she read the message again, not with fear but with calm. She deleted it, letting go of the confusion it carried. Then she opened the surprise they had been planning, a project that supported her work, something connected to her storytelling, her passion, and her future. They had collected resources, equipment, and opportunities that would help her grow. She felt a warm rush of emotion as she saw how much effort they had put into it. It wasn't just a gift, it was a sign of trust, support, and belief in her talent. She realized that the story of the last few weeks wasn't about betrayal or secrets. It was about miscommunication, assumptions, and the quiet battles people fight inside their minds. It was about learning to ask questions instead of jumping to conclusions. It was about understanding that even those who love us can make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are simply the result of trying too hard to help. Over the next few days, life slowly returned to normal. She felt lighter, stronger, and more aware of herself. The people around her grew closer, and the silence that once created shadows now became a space for honesty and warmth. Whenever she thought about the mysterious message, she smiled instead of worrying. It reminded her that life doesn't always give clear answers, but it does give chances to grow. She continued building her work, using the new support she had received. The experience became a quiet lesson in trust and clarity, something she would remember whenever doubt tried to return. The conflict that once consumed her thoughts now felt like a closed chapter, replaced by gratitude and growth. By the time the story ended, she didn't feel the heaviness anymore. She felt grounded, aware, and ready for whatever came next. The misunderstandings had turned into lessons, and the tension had transformed into a deeper connection with the people she cared about. The mystery had faded, but the clarity remained. And with that, her journey, once tangled in confusion, found its way into peace. A reminder that even the most stressful moments can lead to something unexpectedly beautiful when truth finally steps into the light.